The studio lights are blinding. The audience is roaring. This is it. The grand finale of The Best Baker, the most watched cooking competition in America. And standing there, under those unforgiving spotlights, sweating through his designer chef's jacket, is my ex-husband Jerome. He looks confident, too confident. That same cocksure smile he wore when he handed me divorce papers in my own kitchen. The same grin he flashed when he told me I was replaceable. The host, Marcus Chen, a man whose enthusiasm could power a small city, practically bounces across the stage. Jerome Hamilton, you've made it to the final challenge. America wants to know, can the man behind Hamilton's Heavenly Bakery recreate the legendary dessert that made him famous? The one and only, Grandma's caramel cake. The crowd erupts. They have no idea. None of them know that Jerome has never baked that cake. Not once. Not ever. In the front row, Chantel is on her feet, clapping like a trained seal. My replacement, 24 years old, with professionally whitened teeth and zero culinary skills. She's wearing Gucci to a baking competition. The woman once tried to microwave aluminum foil. Jerome picks up a whisk. He's stalling, I can tell. He glances at the ingredient station like it's written in hieroglyphics. Flour, sugar, eggs, butter. To him, they might as well be uranium and plutonium. But he starts anyway. Because Jerome Hamilton never backs down from a performance. That's all this is to him. A show. He dumps ingredients into the bowl with the precision of a blindfolded toddler. Too much vanilla. Not enough cream. He's eyeballing measurements for a recipe that requires mathematical exactitude. Chantel is filming him on her phone, probably already drafting the Instagram caption, "My king conquering the culinary world." She has 847,000 followers who think she actually cooks. 75 minutes later, Jerome opens the oven with a flourish. The smell hits first. Burnt sugar mixed with something chemically wrong. The cake, if you can even call it that, looks like a deflated tire made of mud. It's collapsed in the center, the edges are black, and there's a mysterious liquid pooling around the base. Marcus Chen's smile falters for just a second. Well, that's certainly a unique interpretation. The audience has gone quiet, that terrible, pitying quiet, and that's when they bring me out. I've been waiting in the wings, watching this catastrophe unfold with the patience of a woman who has risen from the ashes. My white chef's jacket is pristine, tailored, with gold threading on the collar. My name is embroidered on the breast pocket. Tiana Monroe, guest judge. I walk across that stage like I own it, because in a way, I do. This whole empire Jerome claims to have built. It was constructed on my labor, my recipes, my 3 a.m. wake-up calls, my grandmother's legacy. Marcus lights up. Ladies and gentlemen, our surprise guest judge is none other than Tiana Monroe, the rising star behind Tiana's Table, and author of the upcoming cookbook, Soul in Every Slice. I can see the exact moment Jerome's brain catches up to reality. The color drains from his face. Chantel stops filming. I approach the judging table. I take the fork. I cut into the disaster he's created. The cake doesn't slice so much as crumble into regret. I lift a piece to my mouth. The audience leans in. I chew, I consider, and then I spit it into a napkin. The gasps are audible. I look directly at Jerome, and I let myself smile, not a cruel smile, just the smile of a woman who has been waiting 2 years for this moment. Jerome, I say, my voice calm, measured, amplified across the studio and into millions of homes across America. You forgot the secret ingredient. He's frozen. Can't speak. Can't move. I lean in closer to the microphone. Oh wait, I forgot. I took it with me when you threw me out of my own business. The studio erupts. Marcus Chen doesn't know whether to stop the show or lean into the drama. Jerome's mouth opens and closes like a fish drowning in air. And Chantel? She's already Googling how to deactivate Instagram account. This is not where the story begins, but this is where his nightmare starts. Let me take you back. Back to when I still believed in us. Back to when I thought love and flour could build an empire together. My name is Tiana Monroe, and I was born with sugar in my veins. My grandmother, Odessa Monroe, taught me everything. She didn't just teach me to bake. She taught me that every cake, every pie, every loaf of bread carries a piece of your soul. "When you bake with love," she'd say, her weathered hands kneading dough at 4 in the morning, "people don't just taste the ingredients. They taste home." Grandma Odessa left me 2 things when she passed: her recipe book and a small storefront in Brooklyn. The recipe book was leather-bound, stained with vanilla extract and tears, filled with her handwriting. Each recipe had notes in the margins. "Add a pinch more cinnamon when it's cold outside. This one is for broken hearts. Make this when you need to remember who you are." The storefront was nothing special. Cracked linoleum floors. An oven that only worked if you kicked it twice on the left side, but it was mine. I met Jerome at a farmer's market. I was selling my lemon lavender cookies, and he was selling charm. God, he was charming. Tall, with that easy smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He bought every cookie I had, came back the next week, and the next. "You're wasting your talent at a card table," he told me on our 4th date. "You should have a real bakery, a destination. I can help you build it." Jerome had an MBA from Cornell. He talked about scalability and brand positioning and market penetration. I talked about the perfect crumb structure and how to keep cookies soft for 3 days. We were different, but I thought we were complementary. I thought he saw me. We got married at City Hall on a Tuesday. I wore my grandmother's pearls and still smelled like brown butter. We opened Monroe's Bakehouse 6 months later, using my inheritance as seed money. I insisted on keeping my family name on the sign. "Of course," Jerome said, kissing my flurry forehead. "It's your legacy, baby. I'm just here to help it grow." Those first 2 years were magic. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my body moving on instinct in the dark kitchen. Croissants first. The lamination had to be perfect. 64 layers of butter and dough, folded with the precision of origami. Then the sourdough loaves. I'd maintained Grandma's starter for 12 years. It was older than some of my employees. By 5 a.m., the cases would be filled. Chocolate babka, red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting so good it made grown men cry, peach cobbler that sold out by 9, sweet potato pie that had people lining up around the block every Thursday. Jerome handled the front. He was good at it, great, even. He'd remember names, ask about people's kids, make everyone feel special. "Tiana's back there working miracles," he'd say, pointing toward the kitchen with pride. "I just make sure y'all get to taste them." The lines got longer. The press started coming. First the local food bloggers, then the Brooklyn Magazine, then the New York Times. The review called my red velvet cake a religious experience wrapped in cocoa and cream. We expanded, hired more staff, opened a second location in Manhattan. Jerome kept pushing, "We need to think bigger. This could be national, international." That's when things started to shift. He hired a business consultant, then a marketing team. Then he suggested we restructure. "For tax purposes," he said, "we should create an LLC. Put everything under one corporate umbrella. It'll protect us both." I was tired. I was baking 18 hours a day, developing new recipes, training staff, managing inventory. I signed whatever he put in front of me. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was trusting him when he said, "We need a more unified brand. Let's change the name to Hamilton's Heavenly Bakery. It's catchier, more marketable. We'll use both our names in the legal documents, but for the public, we need something that pops. But Monroe is my grandmother's, and we'll honor her in the menu descriptions, baby. I promise. This is just about making the business bigger than both of us." I watched my grandmother's name come down from the storefront. Watched them install the new sign, burgundy and gold, Hamilton's Heavenly Bakery. My name wasn't anywhere on it. "It's just a sign," Jerome said when he saw my face. "You're the heart of this place, everyone knows that." But they didn't. Not for long. Jerome started doing the interviews. At first, he'd try to pull me in. "Come on, baby, come meet the reporter with me." But I'd be covered in flour, hair a mess, exhausted from a 12-hour shift. "I can't. I'm in the middle of a batch. You go." So he went. And slowly, the narrative changed. Jerome Hamilton, the visionary behind Hamilton's Heavenly Bakery, discusses his innovative approach to traditional soul food desserts. Self-made entrepreneur Jerome Hamilton on building a multi-million-dollar bakery empire. Hamilton reveals the secret to his famous red velvet cake. It's all about the love you put in. His love, his vision, his recipes. I'd come out of the kitchen, covered in cocoa powder, and see him on the phone with investors, with journalists, with people who wanted to franchise. He'd wave me away. Not now, T, I'm handling business. The kitchen became my cage, my sanctuary and my prison. Then came Chantel. She walked in on a Tuesday, all legs and teeth and Instagram followers. Jerome hired her as our brand development manager. 24 years old with a degree in communications and absolutely zero food experience. She's got 400,000 followers, Jerome explained when I questioned it. She's an influencer. She can take us viral. We're already successful, I said. We have lines out the door. We're profitable. Profitable isn't enough anymore, Tiana. We need to be iconic. Chantel started making changes. She wanted to remove the sweet potato pie from the menu because it wasn't photogenic enough. She replaced my handwritten chalkboard specials with printed menus in a modern font. She brought in a photographer who made me move my mixing bowls because they cluttered the aesthetic. She never ate the food. She'd order elaborate desserts, style them for 20 minutes under ring lights, post them to Instagram with hashtags like Dalwin's Bakery Goals and Bao's Chef Life, and then throw them away. Carbs make you bloated, she'd say, sipping her green juice. I watched Jerome watch her, the way his eyes followed her across the room, the way he laughed at jokes that weren't funny, the way he touched her lower back when he showed her something on the computer. I wasn't stupid, I knew. But I thought maybe if I kept baking, kept building, kept being excellent, he'd remember what we had. Remember that this empire was built on my recipes, my labor, my family's legacy. I was wrong. It was a Wednesday. I remember because Wednesdays I made the bourbon pecan tarts. I was pulling them from the oven when Jerome walked into the kitchen with Chantel and a man in an expensive suit. Tiana, this is Marcus Rothstein. He's interested in franchising Hamilton's Heavenly. I set down the tray, wiped my hands on my apron, extended my hand to shake his. Marcus barely looked at me. Jerome, the numbers are impressive. If we can maintain this quality across multiple locations, we're looking at a very lucrative partnership. We can, Jerome said quickly. I've got the operations dialed in. The recipes are standardized. We can replicate this anywhere. Your recipes? I said quietly. Jerome shot me a look. Our recipes, babe. Obviously. And the kitchen manager, Marcus said, glancing at me like I was furniture. Will she be part of the transition team? Actually, Jerome said, and something in his voice made my stomach drop. We're restructuring the management team. Chantel here will be heading up brand consistency across locations. Chantel smiled at me. It wasn't kind. That night, Jerome came home late. I was at the kitchen table, still in my work clothes, Grandma's recipe book open in front of me. We need to talk, he said. 4 words. 4 words that end everything. He didn't sit down. He stood there, hands in his pockets, like he was giving a presentation to the board. This isn't working anymore, T. What isn't working? Us, this marriage, the business structure. I've been talking to lawyers. The room tilted. Oh, lawyers? We're going in different directions. You want to stay small, artisanal, stuck in the past. I'm building something bigger, something modern. Chantel and you. She gets the vision. She understands branding, marketing, scale. What this business needs to become. This business, I said slowly, that I built with my grandmother's recipes. In the storefront she left me, with my inheritance, which is all protected in the corporate structure. You'll get your share, my share. He pulled out an envelope, placed it on the table. I had my lawyer draw up the papers. The business is valued at $4.2 million. You'll get a settlement, enough to start fresh somewhere. Start fresh. I couldn't stop repeating his words. My brain couldn't process what was happening. You're a great baker, Tiana. You'll land on your feet. But Hamilton's Heavenly needs to evolve. And frankly, you're not the face we need for that evolution. The face. You don't have the look. The social media presence. Chantel does. She's young, she's vibrant, she photographs well. The investors love her. I opened the envelope, divorce papers, and below that, a separation agreement for the business. You're taking everything, I whispered. I'm buying you out at fair market value. It's all legal, all clean. My grandmother's recipes, our company property now. Everything created under the Hamilton's Heavenly brand belongs to the corporation. I looked up at him. This man I'd loved. This man I'd built an empire with. This man who was now stealing my legacy and calling it business. You can't even bake, Jerome. He smiled, actually smiled. I don't need to bake, baby. I just need to sell. And I'm very, very good at that. Get out. This is my house. Technically, it's in the corporate. Get out. He left the envelope. Left me sitting there at 3 a.m. in my grandmother's kitchen. Everything I'd built turning to ash. I didn't cry. Not yet. I opened Grandma's recipe book, ran my fingers over her handwriting, and then I saw it. The note she'd written inside the front cover. The one I'd read 1,000 times but never really understood until now. Tiana, baby, these recipes are yours. Not the paper they're written on. Not the words. The knowing, the feeling, the soul that lives in your hands, your heart, your bones. They can take everything else, but they can never take what you carry inside you. Remember, the best revenge is to rise, and baby, you were born to fly. I closed the book, and I started planning. I signed the papers 3 days later. Not because I wanted to, because I had no choice. Jerome's lawyers had done their work well. Everything was airtight. The business, the building, the brand, even the domain name for the website I'd built recipe by recipe. All of it legally belonged to the corporation. And the corporation belonged to Jerome. My settlement was $380,000. After taxes and legal fees, I'd walk away with maybe $240,000. For 10 years of work. For my grandmother's legacy. For building a multi-million-dollar empire from nothing. I took the check. I took my grandmother's recipe book. And I took one more thing that Jerome didn't know about. You see, what Jerome never understood about my grandmother's recipes is that they weren't just instructions. They were written in a language only I could read. A handful of love didn't mean a handful of anything. It meant exactly 50 grams of her special vanilla sugar blend, vanilla beans aged in turbinado sugar for 6 months. A whisper of spice meant 1/8 teaspoon of cardamom, but only the green variety, ground fresh. Grandmother's tears was her code for salted caramel reduction, cooked to exactly 240 degrees. Jerome had copies of the recipes. He'd scanned every page of the book before I took it. What he didn't have was the translation. What he didn't have was the knowing. The first week after I left, I stayed in a motel in Queens. I didn't sleep much. I'd lie there staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the highway outside, wondering if I should just take the money and disappear, move to another state, start over in a different industry, let Jerome have his victory. But then I'd think about my grandmother, about her hands, strong and scarred from 60 years of baking, about how she'd survived Jim Crow and poverty and losing her husband young, and she'd never stopped baking, never stopped building. Baby, she used to tell me, the world's gonna try to take everything from you. Your dignity, your joy, your work. But they can't take what's in here. She'd tap my chest. They can't take your fire, so you keep that fire burning, you hear? You keep it burning and you light up the whole damn world. I got up. I made a list. First, I needed a kitchen. I found one in a shared commercial space in Bed-Stuy, and $200 a month for 20 hours of kitchen time per week. It was small, cramped, next to a vegan meal prep company that made everything smell like nutritional yeast. But it had an oven that worked and a mixer that didn't sound like it was dying. Second, I needed permits, business license, food handler's certificate, liability insurance. I filled out forms until my hand cramped. Third, I needed a plan. I wasn't going to compete with Jerome directly. I couldn't. He had 2 locations, investor backing, a social media presence, name recognition. I had $240,000 and a recipe book. But I had something he'd never have. I had the real thing. I started small. A table at the weekend farmers market in Fort Greene. Same place I'd met Jerome all those years ago. Felt poetic, somehow, full circle. I made 12 dozen cookies that first Saturday. Chocolate chip with sea salt, lemon lavender, brown butter snickerdoodles, oatmeal raisin with a secret. I soaked the raisins overnight in bourbon and vanilla. Sold out in 2 hours. The next week, I made 18 dozen. Added brownies, dark chocolate with espresso and a hint of cayenne. People started lining up before I even finished setting up. By week 3, I had a waiting list. I kept it simple. No fancy packaging, just parchment paper and twine, handwritten labels, Tiana's table, my grandmother's name and mine, together. Every item came with a little card that told its story. Brown butter snickerdoodles. My grandmother made these every Sunday. She said the browned butter added joy to the recipe. I believe her. People didn't just buy the cookies. They bought the story. They bought the realness. They bought the connection. By month 2, I had enough money to get a food truck. Nothing fancy. A used catering truck I found on Craigslist. Cost me $35,000. Needed work. The refrigeration unit sounded like a dying whale, and the paint job was optimistic. But it ran. I painted it myself. Deep purple, like my grandmother's favorite dress. Gold lettering. Tiana's table, where every bite tells a story. I parked outside office buildings during lunch, outside parks on weekends, outside Jerome's bakery on Tuesdays. That last one, that was strategic. See, I'd heard through the grapevine, former employees who still texted me, still missed the way things used to be, that Hamilton's Heavenly was having problems. Quality control issues, ingredient sourcing problems, customer complaints. So I parked my little purple truck right across the street from his flagship location, and I baked. The smell. God, the smell. Fresh cinnamon rolls, peach cobbler, sourdough bread. It wafted across the street like a siren song. People would walk past Hamilton's Heavenly, drawn by the aroma, and end up at my truck. "Aren't you?" they'd say, recognizing me from the old days. "I am," I'd smile. "Would you like to try a cinnamon roll? They're fresh." Word spread fast. Social media did what social media does. Someone posted a photo of my truck with the caption, "The real baker is back." It went viral in Brooklyn, 12,000 shares in 24 hours. Suddenly, I had food bloggers tracking my location. The Infatuation wrote an article. Tiana Monroe's humble food truck proves you can't franchise soul. People started asking questions. Where did she go? Why isn't she at Hamilton's anymore? What happened? I never said anything negative about Jerome publicly. Didn't have to. I just baked. Just showed up every day with excellent food and genuine love for what I did. The contrast spoke for itself. Meanwhile, Hamilton's Heavenly was crumbling. The first sign was the reviews. Google reviews started shifting. 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars. The red velvet cake tastes nothing like it used to. What happened to this place? The croissants are dry. I waited 30 minutes for a cake that tasted like it came from a grocery store. Then came the health inspection. B rating. Posted right in the window for everyone to see. The violation? Improper food storage and temperature control. Jerome tried to fix it. He hired new bakers, trained them using the recipe copies he had. But here's the thing about baking. It's not just following instructions, it's understanding why. It's knowing that humidity affects flour absorption, that oven temperatures vary, that butter temperature changes everything, that love, actual love and attention, is a real ingredient. His new bakers couldn't replicate what I'd done because they didn't have the years of knowledge, the muscle memory, the intuition. They had recipes written in code they couldn't crack. A handful of love. They'd guess. A handful of what? Sugar? Flour? They'd try everything. Everything came out wrong. I heard through my sources that Jerome was furious. He'd called emergency meetings, hired consultants, brought in a corporate pastry chef and from some fancy culinary institute who'd never baked for soul in his life. The guy tried to modernize the recipes, added foam, made everything deconstructed, served red velvet cake as a soil with cream cheese air. Customers hated it. Meanwhile, my little truck was doing numbers. I'd expanded to catering, corporate events, birthday parties, wedding cakes. I worked 18-hour days again, but this time it was different. This time I owned every single part of it. Every dollar earned, every compliment received, every 5-star review. It was mine. 6 months in, I got a call from a man named David Chen. He owned a restaurant group, had seen my truck, tried my food, wanted to meet. We met at a coffee shop in Tribeca. He was in his 50s, serious, wearing a perfectly tailored suit. Ms. Monroe, he said, I'm going to be direct. I want to invest in your business. I'm not looking for investors. I figured you'd say that. So let me make you a different offer. I have a property, corner lot in Williamsburg, former restaurant space, beautiful kitchen. I'll lease it to you at cost. No profit for me. I just want to see you succeed. Why? Because I ate at Hamilton's Heavenly last week, then I ate at your truck, and I realized I'd been sold a lie. You're the real thing. The market needs to know that. I looked at him carefully. What's the catch? No catch. Well, one condition. You let me bring my daughter by once a month to learn to bake from you. She's 13, wants to be a pastry chef. I want her to learn from someone who does it for the right reasons. I thought about my grandmother, about how she'd taught me, about legacy and passing it forward. Deal. 2 months later, I opened Tiana's table in a brick front space with exposed beams and my grandmother's picture on the wall. The line on opening day wrapped around 2 blocks. Former customers, new customers, people who'd been following my journey, people who believed in second chances and authentic food, and women who rise from the ashes. I didn't have a fancy marketing team, didn't have millions in investor money, didn't have an influencer taking pictures for Instagram. I had something better. I had truth, and the truth was catching on. A food critic from Eater came by incognito, ordered 6 different items, wrote, Tiana Monroe isn't just baking cakes, she's baking resistance. Every bite is a reminder that you can't fake soul, you can't franchise authenticity, and you definitely can't steal someone's legacy and expect to keep it. That article changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't just a local Brooklyn baker, I was a symbol. Other women reached out, women who'd been pushed out of businesses they'd built, women who'd watched men take credit for their work, women who'd been told they weren't the face of their own success. I started teaching classes, not just baking classes, business classes, how to protect your work, how to read a contract, how to own your own magic. The restaurant became more than a bakery. It became a movement. And Jerome was watching it all happen, watching his empire crumble while mine grew, watching me appear on local news segments while his locations got dragged on social media, watching me sign a book deal while he desperately tried to rebrand. I knew he was panicking. I knew because one night, 3 months after I'd opened the restaurant, my alarm system went off. Security footage showed someone trying to break into the restaurant. They didn't get far. The system worked. Police came quickly. But I recognized the car speeding away. It was Jerome's Tesla. He'd tried to break in, tried to steal back what he thought was his, tried to find my grandmother's real recipe book, the one with all the translations, all the secrets. But I'd learned my lesson about trusting people with my treasures. The book was in a safety deposit box at a bank. What was in my restaurant was a beautiful replica I'd made, filled with fake recipes and dummy notes. I didn't press charges. Didn't need to. The police report was public record. A journalist found it, wrote about it. Hamilton's Heavenly owner arrested attempting to break into ex-wife's restaurant. The optics were devastating. Investors started pulling out. Chantel, who'd been getting dragged on social media for months for her role in the whole thing, suddenly announced she was taking a break from the food industry to focus on wellness. And Hamilton's Heavenly, the second location, closed. Then the franchise deal fell through. Then the first location started having trouble paying rent. I watched it happen with the calm of someone who'd already been through hell and made it out the other side. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I was too busy building my own rise. But I won't lie. There was satisfaction in it, in knowing that he'd tried to bury me, and instead, I'd bloomed. My grandmother used to say, "Baby, you can't cheat the soil. You plant meanness, you harvest meanness. You plant love, you harvest abundance." Jerome had planted theft and betrayal. Now he was harvesting the consequences. And me? I was harvesting something sweeter than any cake I'd ever baked. I was harvesting justice. Jerome's world was collapsing in slow motion, and I had a front row seat. It started with the ingredients. One of my former employees, Marcus, who'd worked the early morning shift with me for 6 years, texted me a picture. It was a delivery receipt from Hamilton's Heavenly, budget flour, margarine instead of European butter, artificial vanilla extract, eggs from the cheapest supplier. "Thought you should see this," Marcus wrote. "He's cutting corners everywhere." I stared at that receipt for a long time. My grandmother used to say, "You can't build a cathedral with cardboard." Jerome was trying to maintain luxury prices while using dollar store ingredients. The math didn't math, but I understood why he was doing it. He was hemorrhaging money. The second location had closed, costing him the lease buyout. The attempted break-in at my restaurant had cost him legal fees and reputation damage. Chantel had left, but not before hiring her own lawyer and demanding severance for an emotional distress and brand damage. Jerome was in survival mode. And when people are in survival mode, they make desperate decisions. The reviews got worse. I've been coming to Hamilton's Heavenly for 3 years. Today's red velvet cake tasted like chemicals and regret. What happened? The croissants are dense and greasy. These aren't even close to what they used to be. I paid $8 for a cookie that tasted like it came from a gas station. Never again. 1-star reviews flooded in like a dam had broken. Jerome tried to respond to them personally at first. "We're sorry you had a subpar experience. We're working on quality control issues and hope you'll give us another chance." Then the responses got defensive. "Our recipes haven't changed. Perhaps your palate has?" Then desperate, "Please DM us. We'd like to offer you a full refund and complimentary items." Then Chantel took over the social media before she left, and the responses got nasty. "If you don't appreciate artisanal baking, perhaps you should stick to Walmart. Some people just don't have refined enough taste to understand our vision." That last one went viral for all the wrong reasons. Screenshots everywhere. Twitter threads dissecting the audacity. TikTok videos of people trying Hamilton's Heavenly products and making disgusted faces. The internet is unforgiving, and it has a very long memory. I watched it all from a distance, focusing on my own business. Tiana's table was thriving. We'd expanded the menu, started doing weekend brunch. I'd hired 12 employees, all people who genuinely loved food, who understood that baking was about connection, not just commerce. My book deal had come through. Rise, Recipes and Resilience from Tiana's Table. The publisher wanted it to be part cookbook, part memoir. The story of how I'd lost everything and built it back better. I was writing it late at night, after the restaurant closed, pouring my heart onto the page, the pain of betrayal, the loneliness of starting over, the fierce joy of reclaiming my power. But I kept tabs on Jerome, not out of obsession, out of strategy, because I knew he wasn't done. Desperate men do desperate things. The first desperate thing was the grand reopening event. Jerome announced it on Instagram with a professionally produced video. New management, new recipes, new commitment to quality, a complete reboot of Hamilton's Heavenly. "We've heard your feedback," he said to the camera, wearing a chef's jacket that he clearly didn't know how to wear properly. The buttons were uneven, and we're going back to our roots, back to what made Hamilton's Heavenly special. Except he couldn't go back to the roots, because the roots were me. The grand reopening was on a Saturday. He'd hired event staff, had a DJ, offered free samples. The line was long. Curiosity seekers, people wanting to see if the quality had really improved, former customers hoping for a miracle. I didn't go, but Marcus did. He sent me updates all day. The free samples are tiny, like comically small. The new red velvet cake is the same bad cake with more food coloring. Someone just asked for a refund and the manager said all sales are final. People are leaving. This is painful to watch. By evening, Marcus sent me a video. The DJ was still playing to an almost empty bakery. Jerome was standing behind the counter, forced smile on his face, trying to convince the last few customers that everything was fine. It wasn't fine. The second desperate thing was trying to poach my staff. Jerome started calling my employees, offering them double their current salary, promising equity, health benefits, creative freedom. 2 of my newer hires were tempted. I didn't blame them. Jerome was offering real money, and they had bills to pay. I called a staff meeting, sat everyone down. "I've heard Jerome's been reaching out," I said. "I want you to know, I don't hold anyone hostage. If you need to take a better offer, I understand, but I also want you to understand what you're walking into." I pulled up the reviews on my laptop, the 1-star ratings, the complaints, the chaos. This is what happens when you prioritize profit over people, when you cut corners, when you treat food as a product instead of a craft. I can't match his salary offers right now. What I can offer is integrity, pride in your work, a place where your talent is respected. I paused. And profit sharing. Starting next quarter, you all get a percentage of what we make. Because this success, it's ours, all of ours. The 2 employees who'd been considering Jerome's offer stayed. One of them cried. "I've never worked anywhere that treated me like I mattered," she said. "You matter here," I told her. "We all matter here." The third desperate thing was the lawsuit. Jerome sued me for theft of intellectual property and tortious interference with business relationships. He claimed I'd stolen his recipes, that I was deliberately parking my food truck near his location to damage his business, that I was poaching his employees. The lawsuit was ridiculous. His lawyers had to know it was ridiculous. But it wasn't about winning. It was about draining my resources, legal fees, court dates, stress, the hope that I'd settle just to make it go away. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in small business litigation. She read through Jerome's complaint and laughed. "This is harassment dressed up as litigation," she said. "His recipes, the ones you created, that he can't even replicate, and parking a food truck on a public street is tortious interference? Please." "Can we countersue?" I asked. "Oh, honey. We're going to do more than that. We're going to bury him in discovery, make him produce every document, every receipt, every communication. We're going to depose everyone who ever worked for him. By the time we're done, a judge is going to sanction him for filing a frivolous lawsuit." She was right. Discovery was brutal for Jerome. We requested copies of all the original recipes, the ones I'd created, with my handwriting, dated years before the business was incorporated. We requested financial records showing how the quality of ingredients had degraded. We requested his training manuals for new bakers, proving they couldn't replicate the products. Jerome tried to fight it, but judges don't like obvious harassment. The case was dismissed, with prejudice, meaning he couldn't refile it. And the judge ordered him to pay my legal fees, $47,000. Jerome didn't have it. The fourth desperate thing was the health code violations. I didn't report them. I didn't have to. The Department of Health does random inspections, but they also respond to customer complaints. And Hamilton's Heavenly had hundreds of customer complaints. The inspectors came, found expired dairy products in the walk-in, found improper food storage temperatures, found evidence of pest activity, found employees not wearing gloves, found surfaces that hadn't been properly sanitized. The bakery was shut down for 2 weeks. When it reopened, the damage was done. The closed by health department. Notice had been photographed and shared thousands of times. News outlets picked it up. Former Brooklyn bakery Darling shuttered for health violations. Jerome tried to spin it. We're implementing new protocols. This is an opportunity to come back stronger. But the trust was gone. Once people imagine roaches in your kitchen, they don't come back. The fifth desperate thing was the interview. A local news station did a segment on small business struggles. They interviewed Jerome. He wore a suit, looked haggard, tried to play the victim. "Cancel culture has destroyed my business," he said. "People don't care about facts anymore. They just want to tear down successful Black entrepreneurs." The interviewer, a young woman who'd clearly done her homework, pushed back. "But Mr. Hamilton, the health code violations were documented. The customer complaints are real. And there are allegations that you built your business on someone else's work. Your ex-wife—" "My ex-wife is bitter," Jerome interrupted. She couldn't handle the business growing beyond her vision. This has nothing to do with her. The interview aired, and the internet exploded. People pulled up old articles showing me in the kitchen, covered in flour, clearly doing the work. They contrasted it with recent photos of Jerome in designer suits, playing entrepreneur. Someone created a side-by-side comparison video. Jerome's cakes versus Tiana's cakes. The difference was stark. His looked artificial, overworked, desperate. Mine looked like they belonged in a grandmother's kitchen, imperfect, real, made with love. The video got 2 million views. One comment summed it up. You can steal someone's recipes, but you can't steal their hands. The sixth desperate thing was trying to rebrand. Again, Jerome changed the name. Hamilton's Heavenly Bakery became Artisan Table by Jerome Hamilton. New logo, new color scheme, same terrible products. He hired a PR firm. They crafted a narrative about evolution and growth and responding to customer feedback. It didn't work. People aren't stupid. A new coat of paint doesn't fix a crumbling foundation. The seventh desperate thing was the franchise scheme. With his flagship location failing, Jerome pivoted. He started selling franchise opportunities. Own your own artisan table location. The pitch was slick. Professional website, glossy brochures, promises of turnkey operations and proven systems, and six-figure income potential. The franchise fee was $75,000. 3 people bought in before word got out. Before one of them realized that the proven systems were broken recipes and cut-rate suppliers. Before they understood they'd paid $75,000 for the right to fail publicly. Those 3 franchisees sued Jerome. The lawsuits were public. More bad press. More evidence that Jerome Hamilton was a con artist in a chef's jacket. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I'd remember him handing me divorce papers in my own kitchen. Remember him telling me I wasn't the face he needed. Remember him trying to erase my grandmother's legacy and claim it as his own. No, I didn't feel sorry for him. The 8th desperate thing was the exposé. A journalist from Brooklyn Magazine did a deep dive. The rise and fall of Hamilton's Heavenly. How Jerome Hamilton built an empire on stolen recipes and broken promises. The article was devastating. Interviews with former employees, documentation of the divorce and business separation, analysis of how the quality had tanked after I left, comparison photos of the food before and after, and the kicker, the journalist had gotten her hands on the original recipe book, not my grandmother's actual book, but the scanned copies Jerome had made. She'd shown them to professional bakers, who confirmed that the measurements made no sense without interpretation. These recipes are written in code, one pastry chef told her, without the person who created them to explain what a handful of love or grandmother's tears actually means. You'd never be able to replicate these consistently. The article went viral. It was shared in food industry groups, business ethics courses, and women's empowerment forums. I became a case study, not just in baking, but in resilience, in knowing your worth. In the importance of protecting your work, Jerome became a cautionary tale. What happens when you mistake proximity to genius for genius itself? When you think you can bottle someone's soul and sell it in franchise locations? By the time the article ran, Hamilton's or Artisan Table, or whatever he was calling it that week, was barely hanging on, skeleton crew. Irregular hours, merchandise that sat unsold. I heard through the grapevine that Jerome was behind on rent, that his landlord was preparing eviction papers, that his investors were demanding their money back, that Chantel had unfollowed him on Instagram and scrubbed all mention of Hamilton's from her feed. He was alone, the way he'd left me alone, and his business was dying, the way he'd tried to kill mine. Karma, my grandmother used to say, has perfect timing. It's never early. Never late, just inevitable. I didn't celebrate his suffering. I was too busy building something beautiful. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a quiet satisfaction in watching the universe balance the scales. Jerome had planted poison. Now he was choking on the harvest. The invitation came on a Tuesday morning. The Best Baker was the biggest culinary competition on television. Think MasterChef meets soul food. High stakes, emotional storytelling, and enough drama to keep America glued to their screens every Thursday night. The producer, a woman named Rachel Kim, called me personally. Miss Bart Monroe, we'd love to have you as a guest judge for our season finale. We've been following your story, and frankly, you're exactly the kind of voice we want on the show. I appreciate that, I said, but I'm not really looking for TV exposure right now. I'm focused on my restaurant. I understand, but here's the thing. One of our finalists is Jerome Hamilton. The air left my lungs. He applied months ago, Rachel continued. Made it through the preliminary rounds before we knew about, well, everything. By the time the articles came out, he was already locked into the finale. Legally, we can't remove him without cause. But, she paused, we can make sure the judging is fair, honest, real. You want me to judge my ex-husband on live television. I want you to judge his baking on live television in front of 5 million viewers with complete editorial freedom to tell the truth. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. When do you need me? The taping was scheduled for 3 weeks out, prime time, live broadcast. The challenge was simple. Recreate the signature dessert that made you famous. For Jerome, that meant Grandma's caramel cake. The cake he'd never actually made. The cake that had built his empire. The cake he'd been trying desperately to recreate for 2 years. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. Not my staff, not my lawyer, not even Marcus. This was something I needed to do alone. The night before the taping, I pulled out my grandmother's recipe book. The real one. I ran my fingers over her handwriting, over the recipe for the caramel cake. Grandma, I whispered to the empty kitchen, I hope you're watching. This one's for you. The studio was massive. 3 full kitchens, stadium seating for the live audience, cameras everywhere. The energy was electric. I arrived early, was ushered to a dressing room, fitted with a microphone. The wardrobe team had pulled a gorgeous white chef's jacket for me, tailored, with gold embroidery on the collar. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 2 years ago, I'd been broken, betrayed, starting over with nothing but a recipe book and determination. Now I was here, successful, respected, whole. Rachel found me before the show started. Jerome doesn't know you're judging. We kept it secret. He thinks it's going to be Chef Marcus Samuelson. How has he been? Nervous, really nervous. He's been in the practice kitchen for 3 hours, and from what the staff tells me, he's struggling. The other judges were Chef Patricia Williams, a James Beard Award winner, and Miguel Contreras, a pastry chef with 2 Michelin stars. Both knew my story. Both had read the articles. Let's just say, Patricia told me backstage, we're very interested to see how this plays out. The show started at 8 p.m. Eastern. The host, Marcus Chen, the same man from the opening scene, worked the crowd into a frenzy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the season finale of The Best Baker. Tonight, our 2 finalists will compete for $100,000 and the title of America's Best Baker. The crowd roared, "Our first finalist, give it up for Jerome Hamilton." Jerome walked out in his chef's whites, waving to the crowd. He looked thinner than I remembered. Older. There were dark circles under his eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, but he was smiling, that same calculated, camera-ready smile. In the front row, I spotted Chantel, so she'd come back. Or maybe she'd never really left. She was filming him on her phone, the dutiful supporter. And our second finalist, Maya Rodriguez. A young woman, couldn't have been more than 25, walked out. She was genuinely crying, overwhelmed by the moment. Pure, real emotion. Now, Marcus said, let's bring out our judges. Patricia walked out first, then Miguel. Then Marcus paused for dramatic effect. And our special guest judge, she's been called the soul of Brooklyn baking, the woman behind the viral food truck turned restaurant empire. Please welcome Tiana Monroe. The audience erupted. But I wasn't listening to them. I was watching Jerome. His face went through 5 emotions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, fear, and finally, a forced smile as he realized the cameras were on him. He couldn't react, couldn't show weakness, not on live television. I walked to the judges' table, waved to the crowd, and sat down. I didn't look at Jerome again. Didn't need to. Marcus explained the challenge. Tonight, our finalists must recreate the signature dessert that made them famous. The dish that defines their career. They have 90 minutes. Starting now. Maya started immediately, confident and focused. She was making a tres leches cake, her grandmother's recipe from Puerto Rico. Jerome stood frozen for a solid 10 seconds. Then he moved to his ingredient station like a man walking to his own execution. I watched him gather ingredients: flour, sugar, eggs, butter. He was sweating already, and the ovens weren't even on yet. The cameras caught everything, his shaking hands as he measured. Badly. His confusion over temperatures. His desperate glances at the recipe card in front of him. But here's what the audience didn't know. That recipe card was useless. It was the coded version. A handful of love. Grandmother's tears. A whisper of spice. Jerome was trying to decode it on live television, under pressure, with 5 million people watching. It was painful to watch, even for me. He mixed the batter too long. You could see it getting tough and overworked. He added the wrong amount of vanilla, the bottle slipped, and he poured in twice what he needed. He couldn't get the oven temperature right, kept opening the door, letting heat escape. Meanwhile, Maya was executing perfectly. Her tres leches was textbook, every step precise, confident, joyful. The 90 minutes crawled by. I made notes on my scoring sheet, observed, stayed professional. When Jerome pulled his cake from the oven, I could smell it from the judges' table. Burnt sugar. Chemical vanilla. Something fundamentally wrong. The cake had collapsed in the middle. The edges were black. When he tried to flip it out of the pan, it fell apart in chunks. He stood there, staring at the disaster, and for a moment, I saw something break in him. The mask slipped. He looked lost, defeated. Chantel had stopped filming. "Time's up," Marcus announced. The judges' tasting began with Maya. Her tres leches was perfect. Light, soaked properly, balanced sweetness. Patricia praised the technique. Miguel praised the flavor profile. I praised the love you could taste in every bite. "You can tell this recipe means something to you," I told her. "That's what makes it special." She cried, happy tears. Then it was Jerome's turn. Marcus approached his station with forced enthusiasm. "Jerome, walk us through your grandma's caramel cake." Jerome tried to salvage it. He'd cut away the burnt parts, tried to arrange the remaining pieces on a plate with some caramel sauce drizzled over top. It looked like a crime scene. "This cake," Jerome said, his voice tight, "represents everything I've built my career on. It's about tradition, about soul, about, let's taste it," Patricia said, cutting him off. We approached the table. Miguel went first. He took a small bite, chewed, and his professional poker face cracked. He coughed slightly, reached for water. "It's very dense," he said carefully. "Overworked. And there's a chemical aftertaste. Did you use imitation vanilla?" I used what was provided in the ingredient station," Jerome stammered. "The station had both real and imitation," Miguel said quietly. "You chose imitation." Patricia went next. She took an even smaller bite, set down her fork. "This isn't properly baked in the center. It's gummy. And the caramel sauce is grainy. You didn't dissolve the sugar properly before you started the caramelization process." Jerome's face was red. He was gripping the edge of the counter. Then it was my turn. The studio went silent. Even Marcus Chen seemed to be holding his breath. I cut into the cake. It had the texture of wet sand. I lifted the fork to my mouth, and the smell alone told me everything I needed to know. But I tasted it anyway. Because this moment needed to happen. It was terrible. Genuinely, objectively terrible. Overworked gluten made it rubbery. Too much vanilla made it bitter. The undercooked center was raw and eggy. The burnt edges added an acrid char. This wasn't even close to my grandmother's cake. This wasn't even close to edible. I set down my fork, looked directly at Jerome, and I spoke the truth. "Jerome, I need to ask you something. Have you ever actually made this cake before tonight?" His eyes widened. Of course I have. It's my signature. Because this tastes like someone working from instructions they don't understand, like someone trying to decode a language they don't speak. The audience was riveted. You used margarine instead of clarified butter. I can taste it. There's a plastic quality to the fat. You overmix the batter, so the texture is tough. You didn't sift your dry ingredients, so there are lumps. The vanilla is artificial and measured incorrectly. The caramel is grainy because you didn't control your heat properly. I paused. Let it sink in. These aren't beginner mistakes, Jerome. These are the mistakes of someone who's never actually done this before, someone who's been taking credit for someone else's work. That's not, he started, but I wasn't finished. You want to know what makes this cake special? What makes it worth building an empire on? It's the knowing. It's the years of practice. It's understanding that a handful of love isn't just poetic. It's a specific measurement of vanilla sugar that takes 6 months to age properly. It's knowing that grandmother's tears means salted caramel reduction cooked to exactly 240 degrees. I held up my scoring sheet. But most of all, it's the respect. Respect for the craft. Respect for the legacy. Respect for the hands that built what you tried to steal. Jerome's face had gone from red to ashen. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Marcus Chen stepped in, sensing the moment had peaked. Judges, your scores. Patricia scored him a 3 out of 10. Miguel scored him a 2 out of 10. I scored him a 1 out of 10. And that 1 point is for showing up. The decision was unanimous. Maya Rodriguez won. She deserved it. But that wasn't the moment everyone would remember. That wasn't the clip that would go viral. As the credits started rolling, as the audience applauded Maya, one of the backstage cameras caught Jerome. He was slumped over his station, head in his hands. Chantel approached him, and he shook her off, hard. The camera caught her stumbling backward, hurt and confused, caught Jerome walking off set without a word, leaving his disaster of a cake behind. And then, this was the moment that broke the internet. The camera panned to me. I was standing at the judge's table, looking at the remains of his cake. I picked up a napkin, wiped my mouth, and I smiled. Not a cruel smile, not a triumphant smile. Just a small, satisfied smile that said, "Justice tastes sweet." The episode aired 2 weeks later. I watched it at home, alone, with a glass of wine and my grandmother's recipe book open on the coffee table. I needed to see it. Needed to witness the moment that would close this chapter of my life. The ratings were astronomical. 8.2 million viewers. It became the most watched episode in The Best Baker history. But it wasn't just the numbers. It was the conversation. Twitter exploded. Justice for Tiana trended for 3 days. Women shared their own stories of men taking credit for their work. The episode became a cultural moment, studied in business schools, discussed in feminist circles, dissected on every food blog and podcast. The clip of me asking Jerome if he'd ever actually made the cake got 47 million views on TikTok. Someone auto-tuned it into a song. It became a meme. But the most powerful moment wasn't the confrontation. It was what came after. 3 days after the episode aired, I got a call from the bank handling the foreclosure on Hamilton's heavenly flagship location. The building was going to auction. Ms. Monroe, we wanted to give you first right of refusal, given your history with the property. I went to see it, walked through the space that used to be mine. The ovens I'd worked at 3 a.m., the counter where I'd rolled out thousands of croissants, the kitchen where Jerome had handed me divorce papers. It was empty now, stripped bare, all the equipment sold off to pay debts, just 4 walls and ghosts. I stood there for a long time, remembering the pain, the betrayal, but also the joy. The early days when it was just me and my grandmother's recipes, building something beautiful. I'll take it, I told the banker. I bought the building for $1.2 million, half of what Jerome had valued the entire business at when he'd kicked me out. The irony was not lost on me. But I didn't reopen it as a bakery. I had Tiana's table in Williamsburg, and that was thriving. This space needed to be something different, something meaningful. I turned it into a culinary training center. Odessa's kitchen, where legacy lives. It became a place where women could learn to bake, learn to run businesses, learn to protect their work. I taught classes myself, not just recipes, but contracts, trademarks, how to recognize when someone is trying to steal your magic. I brought in lawyers to teach intellectual property protection, accountants to teach financial literacy, successful women entrepreneurs to share their stories. And it was free, completely free, funded by the profits from Tiana's Table and my book deal. My book, Rise, Recipes and Resilience from Tiana's Table, came out 6 months after the episode aired. It debuted at number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. The book was part cookbook, part memoir, part manifesto. I dedicated it to my grandmother and to every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't the face of her own success. The book tour took me across the country, sold-out events, standing ovations, women, so many women, coming up to me with tears in their eyes, saying, "Thank you, I needed to hear this story." Meanwhile, Jerome disappeared. After the episode, he tried to salvage something, posted a long apology on Instagram. I made mistakes. I let ego blind me. I hurt someone I loved. I'm sorry. It rang hollow. The comments were brutal. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. Apology not accepted. Actions have consequences. Too little, too late. He deleted his social media accounts a week later. I heard through the grapevine, Marcus still kept in touch with people from the old days, that Jerome had moved to Atlanta, was working in corporate sales for a food distribution company, no longer in the baking business, no longer in the spotlight. Chantel, she pivoted to wellness influencing, posted about green smoothies and yoga, never mentioned food again, never mentioned Jerome. As for me, life became richer than I could have imagined. Tiana's Table expanded to 2 locations, the original in Williamsburg and a second in Harlem, both thriving, both filled with the smell of butter and sugar and love. I hired amazing people, paid them well, gave them equity, created a workplace where talent was respected and voices were heard. I got invited to judge food competitions regularly, started a YouTube channel where I taught baking techniques and shared my grandmother's stories. It hit 1 million subscribers in 8 months. I was approached about opening a 3rd location, a 4th, franchising. I said no to all of it. I'd learned my lesson about scaling too fast, about losing the soul in pursuit of size. Small and excellent, I told my team, beats big and mediocre every single time. 1 year after the episode aired, I was invited to the James Beard Awards. Tiana's Table was nominated for Best New Restaurant. We didn't win. But sitting in that audience, wearing a gown my grandmother would have loved, surrounded by the best chefs in America who respected my work, that was victory enough. The real victory came on a Tuesday morning, 2 years after everything fell apart. I was at Odessa's kitchen, teaching a class on laminated dough, 15 women, ranging from 19 to 63, learning to make croissants. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something made me step outside and pick up Tiana. I recognized the voice immediately. Jerome. What do you want? My voice was calm, neutral. He paused. I saw you opened the training center, in the old building. Yes. That's really beautiful. What you're doing. Silence. Tiana, I need to say something. Not for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But because you deserve to hear it. I waited. You were right. About everything. I was a fraud. I took your work, your recipes, your legacy, and I told myself I was just the businessman, just the front man, that it was a partnership. But it wasn't. It was theft. His voice cracked. I thought I could buy my way into greatness. Thought proximity to your talent made me talented. I was wrong, and I destroyed the best thing in my life because of my ego. I leaned against the brick wall of the building, my building now. I'm not calling to ask for anything, he continued. I'm working in sales now. I'm nobody, and that's what I deserve. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did, what I lost, and I'm sorry, truly sorry. I could have said a lot of things. Could have told him about the sleepless nights, the panic attacks, the times I'd questioned my own worth because of what he'd done. Could have told him about the strength it took to rebuild. But I didn't need to. He already knew. "Jerome," I said finally, "I appreciate you calling. I do. But my forgiveness isn't what you need. You need to forgive yourself. Make amends by being better, by treating people with respect, by understanding that real success isn't about taking, it's about building." "I know," he whispered. "And Jerome, don't call this number again. Not because I hate you, but because I've moved on. You're part of my past. A lesson learned. But not my present, not my future." "I understand." I hung up, went back inside to my class, to the women learning to fold butter into dough, creating layers of possibility with their own hands. That was the last time I spoke to Jerome Hamilton, 5 years later. I'm standing in the kitchen of Odessa's training center. It's graduation day for our 20th cohort, 40 women who've completed the 6-month program. They're getting certificates, business licenses, and seed funding to start their own ventures. One of them, a woman named Sophia, who'd been laid off from her corporate job at 45, is opening a Colombian bakery in Queens. She's using her grandmother's recipes. She's protected her intellectual property. She knows her worth. Another, a 19-year-old named Jasmine, who'd aged out of foster care, is launching a vegan dessert company. She's partnered with a business lawyer from day one. She's building something she can never lose. They're all doing it right. Learning from my mistakes, building on my lessons. My book is in its 7th printing. I've written 2 more. One on business strategy for creative entrepreneurs. One that's just my grandmother's recipes with her stories. Tiana's Table is still going strong. We've kept it to 3 locations: Williamsburg, Harlem, and one in Brooklyn, near where my grandmother's original storefront stood. We're profitable. We're excellent. We're enough. I'm 40 now. There's gray in my hair that I don't hide. Laugh lines around my eyes that I've earned. I'm single, but not lonely. Too busy. Too fulfilled. I still wake up at 3 a.m. sometimes, but now it's by choice, not necessity. I like the quiet, like the meditative quality of baking in the dark. Last month, I received a letter, handwritten, forwarded through my publisher. It was from Jerome's mother. Jerome had passed away. Heart attack at 43. She wanted me to know. "He never recovered from what he lost," she wrote. "Not the business, you, the chance to be a good man. He carried that regret until the end." I didn't go to the funeral, didn't send flowers, but I did light a candle in my grandmother's kitchen. Not for Jerome. For the version of him I'd loved once. For the dreams we'd had before greed corrupted them. And then I blew out the candle and moved on. Because here's what I learned. Some people are chapters in your story. Some are whole volumes. But very few get to be the epilogue. Jerome was a chapter, a painful, necessary chapter that taught me about resilience and worth and the difference between being valued and being valuable. But the epilogue, that's mine. That's my grandmother's legacy living on through every woman I teach. That's the smell of fresh bread at dawn. That's the satisfaction of building something that can't be taken because it lives in my hands, my heart, my soul. That's knowing that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rising. And baby, I was born to fly. I'm in the kitchen at Tiana's Table, Saturday morning. The line is already forming outside. One of my bakers, a young man named David who learned from me at Odessa's kitchen and now runs my Harlem location, comes in early. "Tiana," he says, "I've been working on something. A new recipe. It's my grandmother's sweet potato pie, but I've added my own touch." He pulls out a pie. The crust is perfect. The filling is smooth, spiced beautifully. He's nervous, waiting for my approval. I cut a slice, taste it, it's excellent. Different from mine, different from his grandmother's, but excellent. "David," I say, "this is beautiful. You know what this needs." "What?" "Your name. This is David's sweet potato pie, not your grandmother's, not mine, yours. You created this. You own it." His eyes well up. "You mean it?" "I mean it. And I want you to write down the recipe exactly as you make it, measurements, temperatures, everything. Then I want you to trademark it, register it, protect it, because this," I hold up the slice, "this is your magic, and nobody gets to take your magic." He hugs me. Hard. And I think about my grandmother, about how she'd be proud, not just of what I've built, but of what I'm passing forward. The lesson isn't just about baking, it's about knowing your worth, protecting your work, understanding that your value isn't determined by who tries to steal from you, it's determined by what you build despite them. I look at the picture of my grandmother on the wall. She's wearing her Sunday dress, holding a cake, smiling that knowing smile. And I swear I can hear her voice. That's my girl. You kept the fire burning. Now you're lighting up the whole damn world. I smile back at her picture. Then I tie on my apron, preheat the ovens, and get to work. Because that's what we do. We rise at dawn. We create with our hands. We build legacies that can't be stolen. We bake. And we rise. Always. Always. We rise.